Welcome to the deep dive. You've sent us a really interesting collection of analyses on the Internet Computer Protocol, ICP. We're going to dig into its current market situation and look at what the experts are, predicting for its future price.
Exactly. We've got market takes from Binance Square people like Mushtaq Brohi, INCOM, IC Plus forecasts from Changelly, FX leaders, and CoinCodex. And, to keep our feet on the ground, there's also an Investopedia piece looking at how reliable crypto predictions generally are.
Right. So our mission today is to cut through some of the noise, understand what's really driving ICP, look at the different expert views, and importantly, acknowledge just how uncertain this whole crypto forecasting game can be. Okay, let's dive right in. What's the current picture for ICP?
Well, as of early May 2025, the price seems to be bouncing around roughly between $4.90 and $5.42. It kind of is a choice you look at. Mushtaq Brohi on Binance Square, for instance, had it near $4 right at the start of May.
And he mentioned something, technical patterns, something about a confusing but technically important structure. What was that about?
Yeah, he saw like two potential signals pointing in opposite directions. On one hand, a possible double bottom pattern down around the $4.60 to $4.90 mark. That's often seen as bullish. Like the price tried to fall twice but couldn't break lower.
Suggesting buyers are stepping in there?
Exactly. But he was cautious. Said it needed confirmation, like 2 daily closes of $5.30, to really signal a proper upward move.
Okay, so a potential plus, if it breaks that $5.30 level, what was the other side of this confusing picture then?
The bearish side was a head and shoulders pattern he thought he saw forming, with the neckline around $5. That pattern often points towards a potential downturn.
Okay.
And the fact the price hadn't managed to stay above $5.30 consistently, and it kind of dipped after hitting it, that added a bit of weight to the bearish view.
So it sounds like a real tug of war around that $5 level. Did Brohi pinpoint specific key levels to watch?
He did. He marked out a support zone, basically where buying might step in between $4.60 and $5, and then resistance where selling might cap the price between $5.30 and $5.60.
Oh, okay.
He also warned, about short-term weakness if ICP couldn't get back above $5 soon. Said $4 could be the next stop if it failed there.
Right. $4 would definitely feel like a drop. Okay, let's switch gears slightly. Changelly, what did their data show around the same time?
Changelly actually had a slightly higher price in their last update, $5.42. And interestingly, their overall sentiment was leaning neutral to bullish 64% positive, they said.
Oh, okay.
And their fear and greed index, that was at 70, firmly in greed territory. Suggests investors were feeling pretty optimistic then. They also noted 17 out of the last 30 days were green days for ICP, and volatility was around 4.13% for the month.
Greed at 70. That definitely contrasts with the technical caution we just heard. What about CoinCodex? Where did they have the price?
CoinCodex reported $4.97. This was on May 8th, 2025, and they pointed out it was actually up quite a bit that day, 9.14%. So a significant jump in just 24 hours, according to them.
A good day for ICP holders then, based on their numbers. And rounding out the current picture, FX leaders.
FX leaders reporting on May 9th had the price at 4.8141 cents. Their very short-term forecasts, like for the day and the week, were pretty flat, hovering around $4.85. And their technical indicators, RSI and ADX, were pointing towards a neutral market too.
So it really does sound like a mixed bag in early May. Some positive daily movement, some bullish sentiment, but also these technical warnings around $5 and a sense of stability from FX leaders. Okay, now let's get to the predictions. What are these sources saying about the near term, like the next month or the rest of 2025?
For the immediate short term, say the next 30 days, INCOM's summary on Binance Square suggested things would likely stay pretty stable. Hovering around that $5 mark seemed to be the general consensus from the sources they looked at.
Okay, so maybe not much fireworks expected right away, but looking out towards the end of 2025, that's where predictions often start to spread out, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. INCOM's summary for the rest of the year showed a huge range. You had conservative estimates like from Light Finance, Trading Beasts, Wallet Investor. They were talking maybe $4.53 up to $7.50.
So relatively contained.
Right. The more moderate views like CoinStat seeing maybe $4.29 to $11.20. Cryptopolitan was similar, $4 to $8. But then FlipPay started sounding more optimistic, suggesting $8.51 up to maybe $21.44.
Okay, now we're starting to see bigger numbers. Were there even more bullish takes than that?
Absolutely. Investing Haven, for example, had a wide range from $5.55 all the way up to $22.44. But they even mentioned potential for $30. Noonie Wallet blog just put out $17 for the year end. and Coinpedia's expert panel. They landed somewhere between $7 and $19.50.
Wow. So anywhere from staying under $5 to potentially hitting $30 within, 7 or 8 months? That really shows the uncertainty, doesn't it?
It really does.
What about Changelly? You mentioned their current price. Did they give more specific short-term forecasts? They often do those day by day or week by week.
They did. They actually predicted $6.17 by May 12th, which, was just a few days after these other reports. And for May 2025 as a whole, their average prediction was around $9.64, but with a pretty wide potential swing from $5.49 up to $13.78.
$13.78 in May. Okay.
Yeah. And then for the rest of 2025, their monthly average predictions kind of bounced around, bottoming out maybe $5.41 in July, but back up to $10 by December.
Interesting. So Changelly's view for May was definitely more bullish than some of those conservative year-end calls. And that $30 figure we heard, where did that specifically come from again?
It was highlighted by IC on Binance Square. They sourced it from Stealthy X, placing it firmly at the optimistic end of the 2025 predictions.
Gotcha. And CoinCodex, they had that big daily jump on May 8th. Did they look even a few days further out?
They did, just a short hop, but they predicted $6.35 by May 13th. That would be like a 30% increase from where they saw it on the 8th.
And finally, FX leaders on this shorter time frame say the next few months.
FX leaders seem to think the price would probably stay roughly in the current range for the next 1 to 6 months. But they did add a caveat potential for upward movement if the actual ICP technology starts getting real traction and adoption.
Adoption. That seems key. It's clear there's just a massive range of opinions for the short term.
Right.
What are the common threads? What factors do these sources keep bringing up as drivers for ICP's price?
Well, a few things pop up again and again. Market sentiment is a big one. Just the general mood in the crypto market, whether it's bullish or bearish overall, that has a huge impact.
Sure, a rising tide lifts all boats sometimes.
Exactly. Then there's adoption specifically for ICP and new partnerships. Those are seen as critical. And of course, technological progress within ICP, things like integrating with Bitcoin and Ethereum, rolling out new features.
But actual utility and development. Makes sense. What else?
The health of the ICP ecosystem itself. So more dApps being built, more users actually coming on board. That's important. And beyond ICP itself, everyone mentions the wider crypto market trends and, general macroeconomic conditions.
So ICP isn't in a vacuum. Its success is partly tied to the bigger picture.
Precisely. IC on Binance Square specifically listed supply and demand, news, good or bad, and any regulatory stuff. FX leaders also talked about, how blockchain tech and dApps evolve generally, but they also warned about things like investor caution or new regulations potentially putting the brakes on things.
It's definitely a complex mix of internal tech progress and external market forces.
Okay, let's zoom out even further, the really long term. What are people saying about, say, 2026 out to 2050? This is where things can get, pretty wild.
You're not wrong there. Changelly gave yearly predictions, and mostly they trend upwards. For 2026, their average guess is $13.90. Interestingly, they have a small dip predicted for 2027 down to an average of $12.
A dip. Any reason given? Not explicitly in the summary we have, but it's not unusual to see consolidation phases in long-term crypto forecasts. After that dip, though, they see it climbing again. Averaged $20.32 in 2028, $27.85 in 2029, and then hitting an average of $39.30 in 2030.
Okay, so nearly $40 by 2030 in their view, despite a little wobble. What about beyond 2030?
That's where Changelly's numbers really start to accelerate. Averages of $58.79 in 2031, $86.24 in 2032, $119.36 in 2033, $175.12 in 2034, and then these massive jumps later on, predicting an average of $3,646 in 2040. And get this, $5,131 in 2050.
Well, IC on Binance Square, pulling from Stealthy X again, had a more specific target for 2030, $116. They also mentioned Techopedia suggesting a peak of $200 by 2030.
Still very bullish, but maybe not quite as extreme as Changelly's later years.
Right. But then IC also cited priceprediction.net, which saw a potential peak of $109.87 by 2030, but then leaped to a maximum of $7,394 by 2050. So even higher than Changelly eventually. Okay, so some see it going even further. Were there any, more conservative long-term views in IC's summary?
Yes, definitely. They noted digital coin price was much more restrained, predicting a max of $64.13 and a minimum of $58.06 by 2030. So staying below $100 in that time frame.
A huge difference there.
And finally, Telegano was mentioned as being quite optimistic again. Their 2030 range was $139.18 minimum up to $175.41 maximum. And for 2040, they saw $359.23 minimum $402.54.
Okay, so the range is just enormous when you look out that far, from maybe $60 to over $7,000. It really brings home the point about remembering the tech here, doesn't it? What is ICP trying to do fundamentally?
Absolutely. At its core, the Internet Computer Protocol is trying to be a decentralized cloud computing platform. The big idea is to let people host websites, apps, data, everything directly on the blockchain network, bypassing traditional centralized cloud providers like AWS or Google Cloud.
And it uses unique tech for that, like canisters. Could you maybe break that down simply for someone less familiar?
Sure. Think of canisters as sort of superpowered smart contracts. They hold code and data like regular smart contracts, but they can also directly serve web content like web pages and application interfaces straight to users' browsers. That's key to building fully on-chain apps without needing separate web servers.
Ah, okay. So the app logic and the user interface live together on the blockchain. And what about the governance, the network nervous system?
The NNS, yeah.
Yeah.
That's basically the decentralized brain managing the whole internet computer network. It's an autonomous system run by people who hold the ICP utility token. They propose and vote on everything, network upgrades, economic rules, adding more capacity by creating new subnets for scaling. It's all about community control.
Community control, decentralized hosting. And IC on Binance Square also mentioned some user-friendly features.
Yeah, they pointed out a few things aimed at making it easier to use, like potentially using biometrics instead of passwords. There's also this reverse gas model where the apps pay for computation, so users don't necessarily need to hold ICP tokens just to interact with the service.
That could lower the barrier to entry quite a bit.
Could do. They also highlighted the scaling potential, theoretically unlimited apps and storage via subnets, plus privacy features with something called internet identity, and the fact you can run entire websites from these canister smart contracts.
Those definitely sound like features that could attract users and developers. But given these wild price predictions, maybe now's the time for that Investopedia reality check. How reliable are crypto price predictions generally? What should we take away from that article?
Well, the Investopedia piece basically urges extreme caution. They argued that a lot of crypto predictions, frankly, lack solid analytical backing. They can be driven much more by excitement, hype, than by any real fundamental value assessment.
That feels very true for the space sometimes. Enthusiasm doesn't always equal accuracy.
Exactly. The article also mentions how some analysts tend to be always bullish or always bearish no matter what. And it stresses how much sheer speculation and emotion drive crypto prices. That makes them super volatile and really hard to predict reliably using traditional methods. Media hype plays a big role too.
Oh yeah, we've all seen how a tweet or a news story can send prices flying or crashing.
For sure. And Investopedia makes another key point. A lot of the trading volume in crypto isn't necessarily about using the tech, it's just about betting on price movements. Plus, they say the whole industry is just inherently difficult to analyze. There aren't always good comparisons to traditional assets, the regulations are constantly changing, and for many coins, it's hard to pin down any intrinsic value.
So it's like trying to predict the unpredictable in many ways. Okay, bringing it back to ICP specifically then. What were the main risks and opportunities that stood out from the sources we looked at?
On the opportunity side, IC on Binance Square mentioned things like ICP being a good potential platform for AI, providing a tamper-proof environment. They also highlighted the power of its canisters, the user-friendly aspects we discussed, being cost-effective, and even being relatively green compared to some other blockchains.
Those sound like solid potential plus points. What about the risks, the potential downsides?
Well, the usual suspects came up. Volatility, just the inherent riskiness of the whole crypto market, regulatory uncertainty, nobody knows exactly what rules might come down the line, and of course competition from other platforms trying to do similar things.
Makes sense.
FX leaders mentioned those too. Volatility, regulation, but also stressed how much depends on those broader market trends and just general investor confidence, which can shift quickly.
So even with innovative tech, ICP still faces the same big market and regulatory hurdles as everyone else in crypto.
Okay, we've covered a ton of ground here. Current prices, future guesses ranging from conservative to astronomical, the core tech, the reliability issues, the risks. What's the main thing you think listeners should take away from all this?
I think the biggest takeaway is just the sheer range of these predictions, from staying around $5 to going over $7,000 eventually. It just hammers home how speculative this all is. Like Investopedia warned, and like the sources themselves often say, these forecasts are not financial advice, they're just potential scenarios.
Absolutely critical point. It's about understanding possibilities, not certainties. But ICP does have some interesting fundamental ideas aiming for real-world use, right? It does, yeah. The core goal of being a decentralized cloud, the canister tech, the NNS governance, the integration potential. It's an ambitious vision for a different kind of internet. But, turning that vision into mass adoption and seeing the price follow, that depends on navigating all those risks. We talked about market swings, regulation, competition, and actually succeeding in building out that ecosystem.
So high potential, high risk, the classic crypto story in many ways. Which means, as always, it really comes down to you, the listener, to do your own homework, really dig into it, and think hard about your own comfort level with risk before making any moves.
Exactly. Nothing beats doing your own research.
Okay, so here's a final thought to leave you with. Thinking about ICP's huge ambition to decentralize the web and knowing how volatile crypto is, what single fundamental change, maybe in tech adoption or maybe in how we use the internet, do you think would be most crucial for ICP to actually hit those incredibly high long-term price targets? And on the flip side, what single event or challenge do you think could most likely derail its progress, even with its cool technology? Definitely something to chew on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.